Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty podcast, coming at you live on the YouTube channel presented by the FantasyHolics Podcast Network. As always, I'm Bo. That's Brant. Here we are, Brant. We got the Senior Bowl going on. Most of the NFL has a head coach moving into next season, with the most recent one being your Seattle Seahawks announcing today. We still have to wait to see who's going to be the man at the helm of the Washington Commanders. We much thought it was going to be Ben Johnson for quite a while, but he does return back to the Detroit Lions. In other fantasy news, everybody who suffered and endured Arthur Smith in Atlanta and was very excited that he was gone in Atlanta, he now gets to go tank the fantasy value of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there's been some things happen in the NFL since we last recorded, Brant. In addition to the coaching stuff getting shaken out, the Senior Bowl is going on in Mobile, Alabama currently. So there's just a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, shaking and baking here as we get closer to a Chiefs 49ers rematch in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. The match that sparked COVID.
True.
But with the Senior Bowl that is live on Saturday at noon. On the NFL Network, if anyone wants to check it out. I know I record it every year, and I go back and watch it on my off day and break down some. I find some diamonds in there that I kind of like, and I do a little deeper research on. But yeah, with the Senior Bowl coming up, that's always exciting. Seattle getting a coach was exciting for me today. Unfortunately, I had to take the day off of work for some unfortunate circumstances for myself. So I got that news as soon as it broke, which was kind of exciting for me to actually be off that day, not wait till 3:30 to see it. But yeah, I'm excited to see what he's going to bring in for offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. Arthur Smith was a great offensive coordinator in Tennessee, so maybe hold a little bit of hope, maybe just a little bit, and see what maybe he does.
He was great for Derrick Henry, so maybe he'll be great for Najee/Jalen Warren. I worry about George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, guys like that. So
it'll be interesting to see, but that's the Steelers' way. So I could definitely see them going back to pounding the heck out of that ball. The Commanders, who knows what's coming their way now?
I still think that job there comes down to Mike Vrabel and Dan Quinn. I think it started to take shape a little bit. It looks like I wasn't sure Dan was going to get out of town there the other day when he was there, but now that the Seattle job's off the market, I could see Dan going. Dan maybe he wants to go back to Dallas. I don't know. All of a sudden, this Washington job's not as appealing as I thought it was going to be. But nonetheless, Brent, here we are today. We've got some more rookies we're going to talk about. We've got some running backs, some tight ends that we're going to get into. So without further ado, let's get the bibs on.
And let's see.
So real quick, I did want to, since we talked about the Senior Bowl a little bit before the intro, I did want to talk about it. We've seen some wide receivers and some cornerbacks go head-to-head on one-on-ones, so these quarterbacks can get some game in them. Bo Nix has been extremely accurate. It's early. We'll see how that transitions as the week goes on. But Bo Nix has been the quarterback that I think has stood out at this point, with the exception of I think that Pratt from Tulane is also having a good week so far. But the two wide receivers that right now are really just shocking people are Roman Wilson out of the University of Michigan, who's definitely having himself a good week, and then Ladd McConkey out of Georgia is the other one that is just finding separation all over the place. So it'll be interesting to see what those guys do for their draft stock as the course of the Senior Bowl shakes out. So definitely two names to keep your eye on there. I'm sure there'll be more from the Senior Bowl to come for Brant and I as it progresses through the rest of the week. But I didn't want to get this episode out without doing a little justice to the Senior Bowl. So
yeah, absolutely. The Senior Bowl is always a good time to watch. You find those diamonds in the rough. You find the McConkey. That was a guy you and me talked about a while ago, where he had a good college season. He was great in the slot role. We haven't dove deep into him, but today we're going to get into our running backs and our tight ends. This is our first rookie breakdown of these players. You and me will get in depth, deeper, as we do more film watch, as we get some combine stats, as we get some pro comps, and get to see a little bit more of them outside of the game. And, in the underwear Olympics, we'll get more in depth of our breakdowns. But this is one of our first breakdowns of the off season.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing I want to say about this, because we're going to start with the running backs here, then we'll move into the tight ends. And I think what's happened to the NFL fantasy community is it's really, if you want to draft an immediate impact player, it's almost wide receiver and tight end anymore. If you think back to recent draft classes, we've had, Trey McBride come on, make an impact. Greg Dulcich, his first year before the injury. And this year, of course, with, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, we've had these tight ends come onto the scene. And unfortunately, there's a lot of us in this dynasty landscape, Brant, that we have aging, fading out running backs. The Austin Eckler's, the Derrick Henrys, the Saquon Barkley's, the guys that we're not sure how much longer we have with them. And we're trying to draft replacements. The problem is this draft class, there's just not. This is a very underwhelming draft class. However, what I will say, and again, Brant, you alluded to it, we've only just scratched the surface of this class. A lot of it's going to be landing spot dependent. Some of these guys go to good landing spots where there's a clear path to work. They're going to shoot up draft boards. So this is going to be one of those years. It's that way every year. This is going to be one of those years, Brant, where your evaluations have to change every step of the way. You got to constantly be, evolving with your evaluations as the draft comes, as the combine comes. So it'll be interesting to see what our mock drafts look like, maybe in a month versus, come August.
Right. So. Absolutely. And this running back class, as you alluded to, isn't the greatest. There are a few names that most people know, Blake Corum, and one of the guys I'm going to talk about, Trey Benson, is another guy that a lot of names that but outside of really, there might be a name or two I'm missing off the top of my head, but there's only 2 or 3 names that really have stood out to me. Trey Henderson, going back to college, really dropped this draft class as well. But I'm gonna get straight into Trey Benson. He's a running back out of Florida State. Most draft boards have him as top 3. I don't want to say where I have him yet because I haven't broke all of the running backs down. Most drafts have him as top 3 running back in this class. He's 6'1", 223 pounds, built like an NFL running back. In size comparison, he's a workhorse back. Size comparison is Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson is 6'1", 225 on his last listed on ESPN. So almost identical in size comparison. Benson is a 2-year starter with FSU. Freshman, he played for Oregon. He has over 150 carries in both seasons with FSU and over 900 yards in both seasons in 2022 and 2023. He averages 6.1 yards per carry there at Florida State. And we go back and talk about Florida State guys that looked phenomenal on a team that didn't look the greatest. I understand this year Florida State looked phenomenal until they lost their first, second, third, 8th, 9th, and 10th string quarterback there. But this is a running back that really stood out in my mind too, watching some of the games. Some of his strength is he's got good bursts and acceleration, pardon my stuttering. He runs downhill and he runs really, really hard all the time. He's got good balance with a big frame. And his pass catcher, he's good. He's not a great pass catcher. He's not a guy that you're going to see catching 7 to 10 passes a game or even getting a whole lot of third down roll. And that's why that's one of the things he's weaker when you go to the weaknesses. He's weaker in the pass protection than almost any other back that I've looked at in this draft. And the other thing is he seeks the contact when he's running. He doesn't try to avoid it. He's got really tight hips. His movement, his lateral movement to avoid the tackles aren't the greatest. So he tries to just drive through you. He's got a Marshawn Lynch, Brian Robinson type role where he's going to run through you, not around you. And he does have a very extensive injury history. I don't have all those. I was looking through it, and there's been like 6 or 7 different muscle injuries that he's had throughout his time in college. And then the other thing is he's not a great route runner out of the backfield. He'll give you your quick little screen passes and your quick little screens, and that's probably about it. You're not going to see this guy line up in the slot and run a slant or an out route or anything else. You'll see him run those basics running back routes. He's a day 3 pick. I think they got him projected mainly between their 3rd and 4th round. He's a guy that, going pending landing spot, could be a guy that could fit into the 1st and 2nd down roles there in a team. And if they don't have a real good receiving back, he could fill that void too in the 3rd down role.
Okay. Yeah. I've seen Trey Benson in some circles that I've looked at as high as RB1 in this class. Again, I think it's going to fluctuate a ton in between now and the NFL draft, and then there's some more after. But one of my favorite running backs just that has declared at this point, Brant, this guy is also ranked around the top 5, maybe a little outside, maybe a little inside, depending on what website you go look at. But this is Bucky Irving, the running back out of the University of Oregon. So obviously this guy's got one of the best names in this year's draft class as far as a running back. But he's 21 years of age, not overly old. He was a 3-year starter in college, 1 year at Minnesota, 2 years at the University of Oregon. And his size is going to come off as a little underwhelming. He's 5'10", 195 pounds. And that doesn't sound like the type of frame that would hold up well to an NFL environment, except for it's almost the exact same size as Jahmyr Gibbs coming out of college, who people were a little skeptical on last year, who just had an absolute wonderful rookie season. I think he finished like RB 8 or 9 on the season in PPR formats. And here's the deal, Brant. I'm not sure there's a 3-down back in this class, mainly because I don't think the NFL views running backs as 3-down guys anymore. I think for the most part, you're going to see a lot of these like David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier type backfields where, hey, this guy's coming in for a few plays, then we're going to switch it out, keep fresh legs in there, keep the defense on their heels. This guy could potentially be that 3-down back. This year he had 186 carries, 1,180 yards, 6.3 yards per carry, and 11 touchdowns. Just found pay dirt just almost every game, Brant. And then what's more impressive to me is 56 receptions, 413 yards, average 7.4 yards per catch to go add another 2 touchdowns. So he is a PPR stud, if you will, with 56 receptions at college level. Now, here's the things that I like about Bucky Irving. These are going to be pros and cons for some of them, so I'll get into those a little bit later. So obviously with his size and his frame, he is very quick. He's explosive. He's got a very quick twitch, very good put your foot in the ground and cut moves. He's going to be able to make guys miss. He gets out in the open field. He should have some pretty good separation. Should be able to stay there and not get tracked down from behind very often. The one thing that is a pro for me is I read this, that he had 413 yards receiving, Brant, but he actually had 500 and some yards where he caught the ball total, because he caught the ball behind the line of scrimmage so often. His average depth of target, I believe, was like negative 2.3 yards in college. So that is a pro that he's able to turn nothing into a first down almost every time he catches it. However, it's also a con because his route tree is very weak. He can do a lot of work in the flats. This isn't a running back I expect to see doing a lot of wheel routes in the NFL. I don't expect him to be, kind of like what they did with Bijan in Atlanta, lining up on the outside, catching passes. I don't see that for Bucky Irving, but I do think an Austin Eckler-esque, Christian McCaffrey-esque catching work, I think this is something you could see him thrive in. Again, another small knock is his size, but I do think that's kind of where we're headed to in the NFL. It's those smaller, quicker, burst of speed kind of guys. It's not the big bruiser football that our dads grew up with anymore, Brant. It is, or I guess at this point, it's not the NFL we grew up with. Our kids are going to have, the quick, explosive, high scoring, lack of slobber knocking contest that we used to see. So maybe Bucky Irving is that new prototypical running back, but I do think this guy has a very high ceiling. So again, landing spot dependent. I think if this guy goes to a spot where he's got a chance to be, if he steps in right off the jump and goes someplace where he's got a chance to be the pass catching back, I think he has a chance to be the number one back in this class, man.
Yeah, I watched him twice this year playing against Washington. He's very explosive, and as you alluded to, he's got a nose for the end zone. 13 touchdowns this year. He's very fun to watch, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I really think the Chargers would be a good fit for him if Eckler goes away. Since he would be a good fit for him if Mixon decides he wants to hang it up or go away, or as a camp cut. There's a lot of good places for him because there's a few places that don't have that pass catching ability. Tennessee could be a great landing spot for him if it goes later in the draft.
Absolutely.
Let's jump straight into the tight ends. And I didn't go very far. I looked at another top 3 guy in his position, and that's Cade Stover. He's from Ohio State. He's 6'4", 250 pounds, 4-star recruit. But he was recruited as a linebacker and played running back in college. He didn't play tight end until 2 years ago is when he got moved to tight end. So in my mind, what I see in this is a very coachable guy that now 2 years ago you transferred to tight end in college, and now you're already a top 3, top 5 tight end coming out of college. Your draft stock's already there. I think it was 2nd to 3rd round is where I saw his grade as. Tight ends normally go a little later, so I'm going to say 3rd to 4th is probably where he is. But he looks like a very coachable guy. His total stats are in 2023. He saw 41 receptions, 576 yards, 14 yards per catch, and 5 touchdowns in 2023. His strength, he's got that Jimmy Graham type set where he's got a big body that he can box people out and move forward. And the other thing with him is he's got that big body that he can really box out. He's got enough explosion to get deep, but he will get tracked down after the catch. But he does have the explosion to get deep on linebackers and stuff like that. He's got very strong hands, and he's very, very physical after the catch. One of the things that I read on him almost everywhere I did a little research on him was he's a clutch 3rd down red zone guy. Apparently that was where most of his work came, was on 3rd down and red zone. Some of his weakness, I already alluded to one. He's going to get ran down. He's not going to have the George Kittle type plays where he's getting 80 yards to the house. He's probably going to get ran down if he gets in the open field. He's not an elite athlete. He's good, but he's not elite athlete for a tight end position like you see with the Brock Bowers, the Kyle Pitts, who's still, an elite athlete, even though it wasn't used right for the first couple of years. And he needs help in blocking. Well, he came from the defensive side of the ball, so he has to learn how to do that anyways. But yeah, this is a guy that I think he gets drafted. He goes to a spot, he gets a little development, he gets the right coach, he gets the right system. I think this is a guy that you could see actually making a lot of impact in his first year, and a lot of people sleeping on him.
Yeah, so that's the thing with this tight end position, Brand, is it's ever evolving. And I think you've seen NFL teams start to really, figure it out as far as, hey, these rookie tight ends don't take 3 to 4 years to come along anymore. They're not just guys we plug in draft or block. Like, granted, I know he hasn't been used accordingly, but we saw the Atlanta Falcons take Kyle Pitts all the way up at 4 in a draft a few years ago. So I think this tight end position is starting to be one of importance. And again, I think for us in the fantasy community, especially the dynasty, we all want our Sam Laportas, or better yet, we're all chasing that next Travis Kelce is what we're all doing. And, some of us were lucky enough to get it last year in Sam Laporta, and others of us are coming into this class. And listen, we're not going to be that podcast, Brent. We never have been in the 4 years we've been doing this to this point. That's going to preach Brock Bowers on here. You guys are all smart enough to know who Brock Bowers is, what Brock Bowers is about. He's the best tight end in this class. We get it. We're not going to be that podcast where we sit here and talk about how great Brock Bowers is for 45 minutes. And then that's the only name going into the draft. And if you don't get him, you're like, I guess I don't get a tight end this year. Because last year that was Dalton Kincaid, and then Sam Laporta outdid it. So here we are. Let's talk about my guy, Brent. I stayed with the Pac-12 apparently. Last year in its existence, I felt the need to shed some more light on it. I'm going to talk about Tanner McLaughlin. He's a tight end from the University of Arizona. He's 24 years of age. He's a redshirt freshman. First 2 years of his collegiate career were at the University or the Southern Utah University. Didn't even know they had a football program there. And he didn't do a whole lot there. He didn't really burst onto the scene until he came to Arizona. And I know Arizona's not necessarily tight end U, but one of the greatest tight ends of all time did graduate from the University of Arizona, and Rob Gronkowski. So anyway, this guy has a chance. And Arizona had a pretty good football season. Obviously, Brant, your Washington Huskies just hired and promoted basically Arizona's coach to the head coach of the University of Washington. So definitely good things happened there this year. This guy's 6'5", 245 pounds. He's expected to be the third fastest tight end in this year's draft class. Now, obviously, that could change. Still not a ton of breakaway speed, but if he gets that separation, he's not going to be chased down super easy. Last year, he had 45 receptions, 528 yards receiving, 11.7 yards per, 4 touchdowns to go along with that. And I was looking at this, and I'm like, man, that just doesn't sound like that much. So I went back and looked at the actual tight end that we're all chasing now at this point, Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta had a few years with more receptions, a few years with a little bit more yards, never had more than 3 touchdowns in college, and his yards per was right around that 11.5 yards for his career. So definitely not a lack of production for Tanner in college. Again, Brant, this guy, I'm not going to go down the same list. Most of the tight ends in this class are going to have the same skill set. Definitely able to go up and get it in one-on-one situations. I don't think you're going to see a lot of linebackers be able to cover Tanner one-on-one. He's got a good route tree. He's a very prototypical tight end. He can inline block, stay at the line of scrimmage, block, and then run out, release. He's got a good first step. Like I said, he's going to be able to create some separation. Again, just like every other tight end in this class, he's going to have good size hands. I believe his hands are slightly above average for his height and his weight. And he's going to be able to box out just like you talked about with Slover there, and he's not going to have any problem making catches. So this is another one that, again, if he goes to the right landing spot where he's instantly tight end one, and there are some teams out there where there's a need for tight end, whether it be Los Angeles Chargers say they miss on Brock Bowers or don't feel comfortable taking him as early as they are in the draft, or whatever else the case may be. And they take somebody like Tanner or, your Ohio State product there. We could be talking about these guys as a top 10 pick in a rookie draft, Brant. So, again, we will, like you mentioned, we're going to get deeper into these prospects as the offseason goes. At some point we'll put out our consensus ranking at each position for rookies as we do with in-season stuff. But as we develop and go through our rankings and we're constantly going to be changing them, we're going to see more things about these guys jump out that we're like, hey, I didn't notice that the first time I sat down and watched film. Every time you watch film on somebody, you pick out something different that you didn't see the first time. So it'll be interesting to see how these evaluations change and adapt as the offseason continues to roll, Brant.
Yeah, absolutely. This offseason just now starting for us in the Dynasty format. If you've moved on with your leagues, get out there and try to maybe move some draft picks around, acquire some draft picks. But we'll dive in deeper as the offseason goes. I think April's the draft, so we got a few months before that. But yeah, it's always a fun time. There's not a whole lot of depth at the tight end or running back position this year. But you alluded to this the shorter, the athletic, the slender type guys. That's the way the wide receiver route is going too. If you look at Smith that came out and Garrett Wilson's not that big of a guy. But yeah, I mean, that's where the prototype is going almost nowadays.
The young wide receiver that I talked to about pre-show, Lad McConkey, Brant, he's actually only 6 foot tall, 185 pounds. So very slender frame. So yeah, it's definitely the way that we're going. It's not the same old NFL it used to be.
Right. But I think that about does it for us this time. We're not sure what we're going to get at you next week. It'll probably be a few more breakdowns maybe or start talking about some needs or something. But as always, guys, stay hungry.
Stay fat, my friends.